Welcome after the break. I would like to introduce Gaweł Mikołajczyk, who's going to talk about networking security treasures. If you have any questions, just please raise your hand and I'll give you the microphone. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's my extreme pleasure to be here at Confidence 2013 and to talk about networking security. And I've chosen the topic of networking security treasures. I find it extremely compelling to talk about networking all the time. And you are here for networking, right? Because the other session by a great speaker is in the other room about the 0 days rootkits and so on. And here is networking stuff. So great to see all of you. And what I'm going to present today is really the treasures. Treasures means something precious, something that you can use, something maybe that you weren't aware of, or you were just starting exploring. I'm going to give a little bit of technical highlight into many topics which I personally find interesting in today's network security areas. And some basics for the very beginning. Then I'm going to go a little bit deeper into identity-based networking services, the .1x, what is going on in this area. It's evolving rapidly. What are the standardization bodies' efforts to make it more secure, more robust, more scalable, and adapted to today's challenges. Then I'm going to talk about MACsec a little bit from IEEE. Then a little chapter about the profiler. Then flows. Yesterday there was a keynote, and I wanted to make sure that all of you really understand what is behind the network-centric approach to threat detection. What is really the technical background of it, and what is the mindset of people who design it, and what is the research going on in this area. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the cryptography, the VPNs, the IPsec, and the innovations in this area. It's been for ages, but it's not a static area of development and of standardization. So I wanted to connect mentally with my session from the last year. I was giving a glimpse of almost everything that I'm covering today. So please treat this session as an introduction, Confidence 2012. And it's recorded on YouTube, like 45 minutes of presentation. So, networking security. These days, if you come to Confidence, you see that networking is only a small piece of the picture, really a tiny piece, and it is, I think, reflected in the agenda. But I'm doing this for years, and for me this is the focus area, so this is what I am in love with, and this is why I wanted to share with you. For many years there has been a security model which talks about security as an onion, right? We have mechanisms which are overlapping and are creating the defense in-depth approach. We are utilizing the application, the OS hardening, the network hardening, the network segmentation, the filtering, and many technologies available, many best practices to avoid being exposed and to minimize the risk and minimize the probability that I'm being eventually owned. These days, we can talk not about the onion, but about the artichoke. What is that? This is also a vegetable, a little bit different from onion. But the point here is that to get to the core of this vegetable, you can grab one of the leaves and it is enough. To get to the core of onion, you need to penetrate all the layers, right? So onion consists of layers, and this is different. There are leaves which are overlapping, but not necessarily as a layers. So they don't totally overlap. And one of those leaves is the networking security itself. So all the networking infrastructure, the networking devices which constitute the network, and also those who are which are deployed for the sole purpose of protecting my resources. So all those devices, all those physical and virtual appliances which I'm putting. And those days, it's getting more and more complex because the traditional network perimeter is blurring. We have users, we have applications coming from from everywhere because the network is not designed in a fashion those days that there is one ingress point. There can be many ingress points. From the wired network, wireless network, from the outside, from the VPN, from the WAN, and so on and so on. So this creates a really complex environment which needs to be somehow managed. And this session is, by the way, dedicated to all of the networking security folks, and I'm talking with many of you on almost a weekly or daily basis, and the main topic of discussion is that, okay, we are two in our security department, and we have 500 devices to manage. Oh, by the way, we are going to deploy 100 additional branches this month, and still there are two of us. So for all those nameless heroes, I dedicate this session. Because it's getting more and more challenging. And in Poland, the demographics is that, you know, the devices are proliferating, but people are not proliferating. So if you look at the statistics, so that's also quite a pity. I urge you to change this. We need more engineers. Yeah, so security is made of layers, right? And not every leaf is overlapping. So the networking is a huge part of that, and there is the approach by many people who are, you know, searching for rootkits and searching for vulnerabilities of the end operating systems and applications, DBs, and so on. That network is only a pipeline. It's only a pipeline. Why? Because if you have an attack, if you have a tiered infrastructure in a virtualized data center, you have tiers, you have tenants, you have your firewalls, you have your IPSs, you have your virtualized hypervisor-based servers and some workloads running, and suddenly someone discovers an vulnerability in WordPress, and he goes straight into exploiting it. He doesn't care about all this complexity that is underlining, you know, this infrastructure in order for it to work. Right? So this is why these layers are not overlapping. But if the attacker exploits the vulnerability and owns some machine, the point is, what can they see more? And this is where network comes into place and network segmentation comes into place. I was attending yesterday's session, and one of the sessions, I think the last one about mobile device penetration testing was, there was a statement that, I mean, I can run a wireless network, and I have these wireless users, and the wireless users, they can own each other in a wireless network, so they can hack and do some reconnaissance, and then, you know, exploit the vulnerabilities between each other. Because, the speaker said, because none of my customers actually uses network ingress filtering. This was the statement. So my question is why? These are the most fundamental mechanisms that you have for like 20, 25, 30 years, for all those years that the IP networks have been around, right? You can do the filtering. In wireless, you can do the client separation. You can avoid communicating the clients between each other. You can authenticate them, authorize them, put them in a separate broadcast domain, do the dynamic ACL assignment, make them communicate only with the resources they need. That's the point. Of course, with public internet, you are exposing your public-facing web servers, and you need to cope with all the internet and all the possible situations that arise, and there are plenty, right? But in the control environment, which I'm managing, my own network, which I am the sysadmin and security admin, I can manage this. And these are mechanisms that exist for many decades. So please think of it that it is not, fully embraced fact. The most simple things really matter. Use your ACLs wisely. Use the segmentation. Do not build flat networks with hundreds or thousands of users. Do not span the broadcast domain in the campus if you don't have to. That's the point. Many people are, religiously almost connected to the mindset of, I need to give the user a VLAN. No, you don't, because you can apply a per user or per machine ACL for this user to communicate with only specific resources. You can do it easily those days. The switches and the wireless infrastructure is ready for this today. Not only for this, but what I mentioned last year, for getting the context of the user while authenticated by .1x and transporting this context, I mean the attributes of this user, the abstract attributes which are important for security, upstream in the network, so other security devices like IPS, firewall, switching the data center at the ingress can act on this information and produce an active filtering. So this is one of the security assessments done by my US colleagues, and as you can see, really, the stories from production are that really old vulnerabilities exist, and there is a whole bunch of non-network security related areas. But also for the best practices. I was attending a session about the critical network infrastructure at the beginning of this year in London, and the statement was the best practices for hardening network devices is done by the company I'm working with for some years now, is 2,500 pages long. Who reads this? You are supposed to know that, right? You are doing networking security. That's also the problem, the complexity and the capability and the sophistication of the, for example, iOS-based devices. I mean the iOS with a capital I. This is what I'm referring to, right? Those days to achieve this goal. But still, those best practices apply, and do not underestimate it. Also, the intro part, which I'm ending right now and going to some more juicy details, is what about the fundamental attacks you can perform in the campus network, which have been around for more than 15 years. The Makov tool is 1998 to overflow the CAM cache of a network Ethernet switch. It's just the same attack these days. Do you implement port security? Do you implement dynamic IP inspection or IP source guard or DHCP snooping and other mechanisms which are related to IPv6 if you run dual stack on your network, and maybe you don't even know about IPv6 in your network because your clients are doing tunneling like Teredo or other mechanisms and just of connecting to some to some tunnel broker by encapsulating all the V6 traffic in UDP, and you don't have the you are not exposed to the fact that these situations occur. How to do it, how to detect it. That's also a good point. I recommend these 2 sessions. One I did in London this year, and also last year about IPv6 insecurities at first hop at Confidence as well. But we have another session on IPv6 security today by a great speaker, so I don't want to steal thunder from him by any means. So let's go into some real juice and the bleeding edge of what is going on today. So the first thing I wanted to expose to you is the IP chaining. IP chaining. What is it? And what is the challenge? This you have known for like a decade. .1x has been established somewhere around 2000, and we have 2013, and majority of the companies I'm working with are still contemplating, is it, stable enough not to cut my 5,000 users from my network, because I had a really catastrophic situations 5 years ago, and please don't tell me about .1x, it's crazy. In wired, in wireless I can do it, it's pretty okay. But, the idea which is coming back is that I have users and I have many machines. I have endpoints. Endpoint for a networking guy is something like this, right? It may be called a smartphone, but eventually it's an endpoint. It's something, it's an entity that connects to IP networks, switched or wireless, on VPN or WAN. And but with .1x, there is much more which I will not even touch today. I will touch on the profiler, which is pretty interesting and pretty, non-scientific approach to identifying the endpoint itself. Nobody invented the standard protocol on that, and it's pretty complex. So, what the industry is talking about right now is the IP chaining, which is the method for identifying both user and machine at one and the same moment. It was not available for many years, and right now the IETF is working in a working group on a standard called tunneled IP. The draft number 6 has been posted the first quarter of this year, and it's not yet, an RFC document, it's a draft. So if we are talking about draft, we have some early adoption and early implementations. And why this is important and why this is a little bit, difficult and challenging, because if you see a normal operating system boot up, this is a Windows operating system, and you have a user authentication here, right? The red box on the right. It is being done when the user logs into the machine. The supplicant kicks in, it can take credential from the user and can authenticate using PIP or using certificate or any method that turns you on. However, machine authentication happens much earlier. It can happen even before the endpoint even has access to the network. The real access, even the IP address, because IP over LAN is a layer 2 protocol. You don't need to have a DHCP assignment to run that. And this creates a race conditions in, at least in history, in many operating systems like Windows XP, for example, till Service Pack 3, the supplicant did not work properly, the native supplicant, and in Vista it was still Service Pack 1. With Windows 7 and 8 it's pretty okay. But this is pretty complex, how the authentication of the machine and user interacts with the boot up sequence of the operating system. And the answer which I would like to get is is the endpoint really a part of my managed devices, right? I have a laptop. This laptop, okay, it's my laptop. I have administrative privileges, but it's joined to the domain in the company. It's managed by my admin, right? So if they want, they can install me anything here, and what can I do, right? This is the real corporate freedom. So the same here. I want to check if the machine is belonging to my company and the user is also an employee. And if yes, then I do a full or an user-based network access defined by ACL, defined by VLAN and or some other attributes. If it's a guest, it's internet, and if it's not a registered guest, goodbye. I am being cut off from the network. So tying the user and the machine now in a single step to achieve the access policy. And I want to introduce a fidelity meter, which means how this method of authentication is being trusted. And if it's to the left, it's less trusted. To the right, it's more trusted. It's a meter, right? So for many years, we had a concept called machine access restrictions. So your authentication server can look like this at the bottom. And what it does is, on top of a valid user credentials, the radius attribute calling station ID number 31 is being passed with a valid MAC address from the MAR cache. So the machine gets authenticated at the very boot up of the operating system, and then some seconds pass and even minutes, because the user does not necessarily need to log in immediately. Once he logs in, the user auth kicks in, and during the exchange between the authenticator and the authentication server, we have a situation in which the MAC address is being passed in calling station ID, and the authentication server does the lookup for this MAC address. If it's in the so-called MAR cache, okay, the server says, yes, the machine authenticated in the past, that's perfect. I am now sure that this user and this machine are tied together. But this is not one authentication. These are totally separate authentication processes. So it has some limitations. So the user needs to log out every time, or even do in some cases maybe not anticipated ones, reload the machine, not use Hibernate, do not switch between wireless and wired interfaces because the MAC addresses change. So if I plug out my wired cable, suddenly I have a new MAC address. I'm being associated with the wireless network, right? And this MAC address is not in the MAR cache, and the whole authentication scheme is broken because I cannot tie this because the machine was not authenticated on this specific calling station ID, which is the MAC address. And we can have a distributed radius servers in our deployment, and if a machine authenticates against this server, the MAR cache does not have to be synchronized horizontally between some other location. You can check your favorite radius server implementation, but most of them do not share the MAR cache, so it's assumed that the user will stay in one location and would authenticate against the same server, so a kind of stickiness is required. And also hibernation standby by changing the geographical location is something that needs to be considered. And also the spoofing, because once the machine got authenticated, another user can spoof the MAC address and try to authenticate the user, and it also can possibly, it's a limitation, and it's getting exposed to a situation which is not desired because those processes are separated. So we have an IP chaining, and IP chaining those days is based on IP-fast as a very early implementation. IP-fast was designed to, to overcome leap limitations, leap, an ancient EAP method during the, all these tractions with wireless networking security. And as you can see in the first row, the user John Epic and the host lab station with this MAC address is authenticated simultaneously using EAP fast in one transaction. And the bottom two rows are separate transactions for EAP fast. And we want to get to the situation which is being exposed in the first row. So EAP fast relies on TLS and relies on so-called PAC files. So we have three phases of EAP fast. One is PAC provisioning. It can be manual and it can be automatic, so-called anonymous, which provides some small, vulnerability which you can overcome using server certificates, or manual PAC provisioning. PAC is a file, is a data structure which is being, used by the supplicant on the endpoint. So the supplicant, of course, needs to support EAP fast in order to authenticate against the network during the EAP fast process. So we have we have a PAC provisioning in phase 0, tunnel establishment and user credentials. The first is the user authentication, and the second row is the host authentication. So we have two separate authentications, right? The user and the machine, but they are not tied together. This is how it looks like before you implement EAP chaining. This is a more detailed, flow, which I would like to give you as a reference. And PAC files can be deployed manually or can be deployed automatically, so-called anonymously. However, you can use this, you will generate server certificate for certificate-based methods, which are PEEP, which requires the server certificate, or EAP TLS, if you have a both side certificate authentication. And this provides that the initial handshake and securing of the transaction, then we can do the user and host authentication using, for example, MS Chat if you have a Windows environment. So the machine and the user are both entities in your domain structure, right? Of course. If it's not that way, if you have a Mac or if you have a so-called bring your own device, then it's getting challenging. And as of now, none of supplicants, as I know, for the mobile devices supports EAP chaining. So of course, it's an early adoption approach. So the user and the machine are being authenticated. And however, this is separate. And how the EAP chaining really works is that when the machine authenticates, it gets the PAC from the server, if it's dynamic provisioning. And it keeps this PAC file, and when it gets to the point of user authentication, the second phase, the supplicant presents this PAC file together with user credentials. So I present my PAC file from my machine authentication, which has been cached in my machine, and I am also providing my user credentials. So I'm tying this together beautifully in one single second step of transaction, and this is why I get the moment of truth. Okay, this is this machine and this user, and I am providing really the proof that I have authenticated, and I need to have it on my host machine tied with a available for the supplicant. So EAP chaining result, user and machine succeeded, right? So we have a first phase machine authentication, great, and this cookie. The PAC file can also be called a cookie. So this is a cookie, tasty cookie, which is being held by the supplicant. And now the user authenticates because he logs into his machine, right? And what happens right now the user, the supplicant on behalf of the user presents this machine authentication cookie, the pack, and gets the user credential provided also to the authentication server, which is being passed in an IP over radius transaction from the authenticator, which can be a controller, which can be a switch, of course, right? And we have real tying of those two credentials in one single step. And this is if you are looking at your AAA radius server, it could contain rules for network access. So if the rule name is employee, if employee and network access IP chaining result is user and machine succeeded, then employee, which means that I am providing right now the permission. What is a permission? It's a network permission, a dynamic access list, a downloadable access list, a VLAN, some other attributes which can be passed to the network device to enforce the traffic flow. This is why I want to, to expose to you that really network segmentation these days is extremely important. With the proliferation of threats, you have all the technical capabilities today to control, the permitted flows in your network and deny those which are not at the endpoint level, because it's .1x is port-based authentication. This is what the standard calls it, right? So we have 4 situations: user failed, machine succeeded, user succeeded and machine succeeded, machine failed, user succeeded, and both failed, right? If IP chaining is not supported, it needs to be supported by the supplicant, it needs to be supported by the radius server. If it's not, then it's not available, and some implementations exist. So my call to action to you is please evaluate it. Please expose yourself to this. If you are right now in the midst of perhaps some identity project, you're evaluating, maybe in a wireless network, it's normal to have .1x, but in wired, people tend to procrastinate. And now it's the time the technology is mature, and those juicy things like IP chaining are coming big time. So please expose yourself to this technology, and you will be ready when the draft becomes an RFC, and all the AAA radius servers and many supplicants which are available are capable of utilizing standards-based TIP, which is draft now. Okay, so I want to restore your faith in layer 2 confidentiality. We've been using VPNs for ages. If you go to confidence, the first thing you do when you associate the wireless network, you kick off your VPN client and you connect to your concentrator of choice to avoid or at least minimize the risk of something. So the MACsec. Layer 2 confidentiality, which is so much different from layer 3 confidentiality. So IEEE has worked out some years ago a standard which is called .1AE, which is the use of AES, Galois counter mode, at the port level in order to provide confidentiality between layer 2 adjacent network devices. And this is really great because we didn't have it. What do you need for that? You need big fat hardware. On every switch port you need a crypto chip which does the crypto processing on the port level. You cannot do it in software. Well, you can. You can do it on your computer because the MACsec is an approach providing end-to-end confidentiality hop by hop. The user can utilize the .1x supplicant, and the session keys for MACsec are being derived during the .1x authentication, and the user goes into the network and protects cryptographically, so encrypts all the traffic between his machine and the switchboard. What does it prevent? Why this crazy stuff? I'm going to encrypt everything in my network. This is really extreme. Yes, but on the other hand, technology permits it, and you can use it today if you have a MACsec-capable hardware, which is more and more proliferating in switches, in routers, in other platforms, and you will see more and more from every single vendor on the planet. You can do, prevention of the spoofing, of the snooping. The famous attack, so-called floor box attack. What's in my floor box? What's this small? It's called Pony Express. It's a signal enhancer, right? But what does it do? It, sniffs all the traffic and creates a man in the middle because someone put a small Linux server in your floor box in your office and, is recording all the traffic that goes from your wired cable for many, many months, and you cannot even notice. And doing .1x, which can be bypassed, together with MACsec, it's not easy to bypass. So you are doing really AES encryption in software at the supplicant level, and the switches encrypt manually, or they also establish a authentication condition against authentication server and against each other in order to do encryption hop by hop. So how does it work? It works so that I have a switch, and every port, 1 gig, 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig, has a crypto chip, and I have a security association hop by hop to the next switch, okay? And at the port level, the traffic is being decrypted, and I have a clear text traffic going to the data plane of the switch, so I can do anything. I can do QoS, ACLs, I can do traffic export, net flows, S flows, and so on, right? So this is how it works, and it's more and more available on the platforms. Other interesting use case for that is I have 2 big fat data centers, and I have untrusted connection between each other relying on a dark fiber. I want to encrypt 80 gigs of traffic. How do I do it? Do you have any idea how to do 80 gigs of IPsec? There is no single device probably on the market right now which can do it. But you can do 10 gig Ether channel times 8 at every single port level just by using a switch platform which is capable of hardware-based MACsec. And that's all. You don't need to have anything. The switch just does it. And it does it lightly. Why? Because it does it in hardware. Every ASIC on the port is being equipped with a crypto chip. So pretty nifty. I recommend it to you if you have any confidentiality issues in your environment. It's pretty much more and more available and proliferating across many hardware platforms. So the next thing is profiling. So the art of profiling. What is profiling in network security? It's an art. Why? Because you cannot easily identify what this device really is. Is it a BlackBerry, or is it an iPhone, or is it a Windows machine? Why? Because the industry did not come up with any standards-based protocol in order to get this information, where you have 2 protocols. First is CDP, you've been knowing for ages, and second is LLDP. But these protocols are not authenticated, not encrypted, not integrity is provided, nor any other security mechanism. I'm just sending plain CDP or LLDP messages to the switch, and the switch believes I'm an IP phone. Not that good, right? So what we are doing is we are, masterfully getting informations from the network while the user and the endpoint is not necessarily willing to give me information what it is. How to do it? Pretty challenging, right? I need to analyze the traffic generated by this endpoint. Many technologies exist and implementations exist and products exist. However, it is not an authentication mechanism and it is not an exact science for device classification, because you can spoof MAC address, you can spoof a user agent, you can spoof your CDP, your LDP, you can spoof anything. It depends on how skilled you are. You can generate almost any traffic you like, so the network believes you are someone else you are not. So you need to do the hard authentication, the .1x. If someone passes, we believe that he's in, and to get tying it with IP chaining user authentication is great. So profiling is a great new approach for some years. However, you know, I need to get as many information as I can, and I get MAC OUI, I get DHCP, I get NetFlow, I get DNS, HTTP, CDP, and LLDP, and I mangle it all together in a big brain, which can be also an authentication server or some other device server which does these algorithms which approximate the what the endpoint really is. So these are the endpoints attributes which are being collected. You can collect MAC OUI, so you can believe that this MAC address belongs to Apple, right? So you need to have a database of the MAC OUIs ever assigned by IEEE to all the vendors in the universe, and you need to have this information on the brain. So once it gets the MAC, I can say with some probability, of course, do I trust it? Is it where is my fidelity meter, right? That's the same point, right? But anyway, it is, and you can also do on some devices distributed collection. So the switch or a wireless controller does the job and not one server, because for thousands of devices in the network and for thousands users with your iPhones, you will have so much information collected that it will blow, you know, it could become a big data problem. So you can distribute it, and those attributes are being, for this is an example, right? I'm not doing by any means a product placement, but you know, this is an example because it also gets the nice information from CDP and IP telephony and wireless access points and other infrastructure devices or endpoints can use CDP to raise the fidelity meter much higher. So this is really great. Distributed device sensor on each individual device. So the switch needs to be really intelligent to do it. It's not a switch which passes the frames, right? So flows. The session yesterday was about the plenary session was about the flows. So it's raining flows. And for networking security, one of the questions asked at the panel session was, how does it differ from application visibility, from network analysis? It's not for network analysis. For network analysis, you can use a sampled NetFlow. You can collect one packet out of 100 or 1,000, and it's still okay. You can identify the applications with a very high, you know, quality. It's totally enough. But for real threat defense, the modern approach, which is evolving because it's also evolving science, it's collecting everything. You are collecting all the flows in the universe, which immediately leads to a really big data problem. And why do I need it? To detect data loss, detect network reconnaissance, detect internally operating contagion, and detecting CNC channels. So I'm detecting. This is threat. This is not protection. This is getting the visibility, because all the packets traverse your network anyway, and you are the master of your network. At least you should, right? So this is my network. I am operating it. So I can do anything, and I have all the packets belong to me. Maybe not in the legal sense. I am not going into, the legal debates. However, this is what it really does. So identity, source of truth, is the authentication server. .1x, all the users, all the entities in my network are authenticated. And I am correlating this information with the flow information. So I get exactly the information that this packet out of billions in my network and trillions has been sent, and this session, which consisted of 2 kilobytes of traffic, was being sent at this hour by this user. Crazy, right? But this is the ultimate networking big brother, but you can do it today. And internally operating botnets, so that's the same, that's the horizontal malware spread, right? Lateral, like this. Not all switching platforms are capable of actually detecting it. So let's go further. We have a network-centric paradigm shift, getting the visibility from your network. There's a lot of research going on in algorithms, predictive, the entropy and other characteristics of the network flow to identify anomaly. It's extremely hard task, and it's not an exact science. The works of course are on the go as we have. The last thing I want to give you, and I have 4 minutes, is the crypto. Not too much has been said at Confidence this year around crypto, how it's evolving, and mainly what is going on. So with crypto, we have IPsec operating using ISA KMP protocol, so the Internet Key Exchange version 1. So what I would like to share with you is also some real innovations around that topic and in this area of networking security, which is pretty the most common, VPNs, IPsec VPNs. So there is a new wave of cryptographic algorithms today which you can use and are available, which is called the next-gen cryptography or advanced cryptography. So we want to make sure that all these algorithms, all these capabilities in this cryptographic suite are really modern, and we are using more and more sophisticated mechanisms like AES Galois counter mode and elliptic curve cryptography. And elliptic curve cryptography is pretty new. It's been invented in 1985, and it's very interesting because with much smaller key length, you get the same security level, I would call it. Very vague statement. Forgive me, I have only 2 minutes. And it's also, much less CPU intensive. So it's very effective for mobile devices because the battery life in all your Samsung S4s is pretty low these days, right? If you are streaming HD media. So adding crypto on top of it, it just kills the device. This is why most of the VPN clients on the mobile devices do not have the always on capability, because if you do always on, then you drain your battery in 1 hour, for example, right? If you are tunneling IPsec. But the ECC is very efficient at high security. The computational cost is lower with the same amount of security, which is really great. And it is evolving, and it's being more and more active research. And right now we have this technology implemented in modern routers and VPN concentrators, firewalls, and other multi-function devices. So this is what I'm talking about, the life years for sensitive data and the level of sensitivity. This is the blue ones are the next generation cryptography when you compare it to RSA, 1K, and 3DES, and AES, and MD5, and SHA-1, which are pretty, entry level. You should not use them these days. Why? Because most of the platforms today have the capability of running the new next generation crypto in hardware. So if you have a new router or new firewall, you can do it in hardware today, not compromising on performance, because performance is also Can I establish 1,000 tunnel? Can I establish 10,000 tunnels? Normal question by many of the organizations I work with. How do I do it? It's pretty hard topic, the scalability, right? I want scale. It's not about one tunnel. It's about one tunnel 40 gig or about 10,000 tunnels 1 meg, for example, simultaneously, of course, with QoS applied and so on. So this is the cryptographic strength for ECDH when compared to DH. You see the Diffie-Hellman exchange with 3K length and the same level of strength or even more we have with elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman for key exchange, the IKE V2 with 256 bits. Wonderful. So IKE V2, we talked about the cryptographic algorithms and now about the IPsec VPN session establishment. And we have a next generation IKE, which is called IKE V2. It's not interoperable with IKE V1 and it's much better. Why it's better? It's better because it provides everything that was in IKE V1 and it also provides better self-defending mechanisms. One of those is the approach to have the anti-DOS, anti-clogging cookie. Because in IKE V1 it never worked. You can overwhelm your VPN appliance by establishing thousands of half-open IKE connections. And here we have a cookie. So I am checking back if my session is established. And I will be finishing very soon.
1 more minute.
Yes, 1 moment. You know, there was a comic. 1 moment is equal 3 minutes, right? In the 80s, there was a comic, Tytus, Remek, Jan Tomek. Maybe you remember this, some of you Polish guys. Yeah, so the cookie, the anti-clogging cookie, which provides the checking if the person is really spoofing or not spoofing the IP address, if it's really a legitimate peer for my IPsec VPN connection, right? So that's it. We have a much more straightforward process in terms of key exchange, and we have also one important thing, which is totally new and exciting. You have an IP exchange, like in .1x, inside IKE V2. You can authenticate the router in the branch using IP. It's pretty interesting, right? And you don't need to use a tunneled method because the IKE V2 does the protection confidentiality anyway. So you can use non-tunneling IP methods like IP MS-CHEP, GTC, or even MD5, the most unsecure method. So my call to action, the last slide I have for you is if you have a greenfield deployment and you need to create IPsec VPN network today, please consider the Suite B, the next generation crypto, and IKE V2. It's available today, it's deployed, it's robust, and it's been for more than 2 years available, and now you can deploy it in production. And if you have an existing very old legacy VPN network, please consider migrating in the future. Should you have a hardware refresh and please get familiar with this technology. It's really compelling, and you should not, compromise on your VPN on crypto security just because just because you stick to the old IKE V1 and DES or 3DES or AES and the old Diffie-Hellmans. So that was all. Thank you so much, and I'll take questions after the session. Thank you for coming. Thank you.